Hello everyone, my name is Jennifer Gibson. I'm the Director Curator of Gallery 1CO3 at the University of Winnipeg Campus Art Gallery. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this afternoon's panel discussion, Relational Making, Activating Knowledge Through Objects and Spaces. I would like to acknowledge that we are gathered on Treaty 1 territory, homeland of the Red River Métis, ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, Innu, Anishinaabe, Dakota Oyeate, and Dené. And I also want to give gratitude for our water, which is sourced from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation. I acknowledge Gallery 1CO3's position as part of a larger colonial system that has participated in genocidal acts towards Indigenous peoples and their ways of knowing and being. Gallery 1CO3 is committed to moving forward in a good way by foregrounding the perspectives of Indigenous relational makers such as Cathy Mattes, Dené, Sinclair, Tashina Houle-Schlup, and supporting their efforts to decolonize these spaces through speaking about their work. Today's event is programmed as part of Cathy Mattes' exhibition 7 Generations, which has been on view in Gallery 1CO3 since the end of November and is on view until February 14th. If you haven't seen the show, I highly encourage you to go check it out. We're open weekdays 12 to 4. 7 Generations brings together Cathy Mattes' digital photo portraits, We Are Still Here, with ancestor regalia from the Manitoba Museum, and the new short film entitled Relational Making. Together, these works exemplify Indigenous resilience and demonstrate the vitality of intergenerational matrilineal knowledge and creative making. On behalf of Gallery 1CO3, I thank the Manitoba Arts Council for their financial assistance to this year's programs. I also want to express my gratitude to the University of Winnipeg Office of Indigenous Engagement for their support of today's event. And I extend my deep thanks to discussion moderator Cathy Mattes, who is an associate professor of history here at the University of Winnipeg. I'm also deeply grateful to Cathy, to Dené, and to Tashina for sharing your knowledge here today with us. And in this spirit and in the correct way, in a good way, to start off in a good way of doing that, each of the folks who are sharing knowledge with us today has been given tobacco, has been offered tobacco and agreed to share their knowledge with us. Couple of points. This discussion is being recorded thanks to the university's Media Services Department. We anticipate publishing the recording to Gallery 1CO3's YouTube playlist in the next week. Note that there are washrooms just outside the door of this room over to your left. And now I would like to invite University of Winnipeg Elder-in-Residence Sharon Pelletier to start us off with prayer in a good way. And again, I'm so grateful to Sharon for accepting this invitation to share in this way and have offered tobacco for that. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you, Jennifer. It's always so nice to be involved with events that are happening that are showing that the University of Winnipeg is trying to move forward in a good way and trying to respect the Indigenous peoples of this land in ways that were never acknowledged before.
Thank you so much, Sharon, for sharing with us so deeply today, and giving us a lot to think about as we start today's discussion. I want to introduce our moderator today, Professor Cathy Mattes. Cathy Mattes is a Michif, Southwest Manitoba curator, writer, and associate professor in history of art at the University of Winnipeg. Cathy previously taught art history in, I did not practice this, Cathy. Iskabatans wasaga Winnipeg, Department of Visual Art. She also taught for the Gender and Women's Studies program at Brandon University and is an adjunct faculty member in graduate studies at the University of Manitoba. She is a beadworker, Southern Michif language learner, and holds a PhD in Indigenous Studies from the University of Manitoba. Cathy Mattes' curation, research, and writing centers on dialogic and Indigenous knowledge-centered curatorial practice and Indigenous art transpedagogy as strategies for care. And I will also add that she is one of 3 curators of an amazing exhibition called Radical Stitch that has been touring the country for the last, I don't know, a couple of years, I would say. So please help me welcome Cathy, our moderator.
Tashina Houle-Schlup, Cathy Mattes, Tashina Houle-Schlup, Yamachif, Spruce Manitoba no weekend, Tashkamnagayan, de la University de Winnipeg. Merci à tous. Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you very much, Elder Sharon, for your incredible words and setting a tone for today's conversation. I am so excited to hear how these 3 operate or create and walk the land as relational makers. And we're going to start off with Tashina Houle-Schlup, who is a 26-year-old Anishinaabe and Swiss woman with family ties to ebb and flow and to Tunawazibing, and has been deeply immersed in Indigenous art forms all her life, with a special focus on quill work. Tashina creates modern and traditional pieces that pay homage to the quill work of the past. In 2021, Tashina earned her Bachelor of Arts in English and History from Brandon University, further enriching her knowledge and understanding of her cultural heritage. She currently serves as the head of Indigenous programming and engagement at the Manitoba Museum, where she actively shares the rich culture and history of Indigenous communities, and is the organizer of the recent Beadathon. And I met quite a long time ago when she was a student of mine at Brandon University in Ishkabatan, Swasa, which was the Department of Indigenous Visual Arts. Take it away.
Thank you, Cathy, and this honestly feels like such a full circle moment to have Cathy as the moderator for this, and she's just so amazing. But Miigwech, thank you so much, everyone, for coming and listening to us. Like Cathy said, I'm Tashina. I'm Anishinaabe from Ebb and Flow and Tutanawazibing. I'm also Swiss. And I am a quillwork artist, among many other things. And I have a little slideshow here. So I'm starting off with my mom, who inspires me every day. She taught my brother Sharon and I how to quill, how to bead, how to tan hides, how to sew, and do pretty much everything. So I was very fortunate to grow up learning those things. And this is my mom, Sabrina, modeling for Indigenous Reflections magazine. And that's actually me as a baby in that picture there, too. Yeah. And her name is Sabrina. And yeah, she's so awesome. And then this is me. I forgot to mention, I grew up on a bison ranch. And our family also has a natural hide tannery where we tan hides the traditional style using brains. So I grew up doing this, skinning animals, tanning hides. And this is me and my dad skinning a buffalo. And I think I'm like 4 or 5 here. So yeah, I had a very unique childhood. And I'm pretty sure the first bison hide that I tanned took me like a year. So it's a process. And then this is me helping my mom. I'm on the top there, that's my brother on the bottom. We're tanning a deer hide. But I'm just a itty bitty baby there. And then this was our trampoline growing up. So that's a bison hide stretched on a frame there. Yeah. And then this is part of a video that you can actually find on YouTube if you just search up, what is it called? How to paint a bison robe or something like that. So this is me just skinning a bison in preparation for that. And then this is my grandma, my cuckoo Sandy. She has passed on now, but she has also inspired me. And here I'm wearing my Powa regalia, and the thing that's going like over top my dress is called a breastplate. And this was the first quilled piece that I made. So I started quill work when I was really young, but I really got into it when I was 12. And this was the first piece that I ever made because I really wanted something to add to my Powa regalia. And I think it took me like a year because I was 12 and I didn't have self-discipline. But yeah, and I still wear this to this day when I go to different powwows. And then when I was 15, I made this bag when I was staying in the States with my best friend. And her dad is a master quill work artist, so he taught me a lot about quill work and helped me fine-tune my craft, I guess. And I ended up selling this bag to the Prairie Edge Art Gallery in Rapid City, South Dakota. That also took me a very long time. And then as I got older and I started going to university, I didn't really have time to like do big pieces like that. So I started making earrings, and it was a really nice way to make extra money because I was a broke student all the time. I'm sure you can relate to that. But yeah, this is one of my favorite pairs of earrings that I ever made. And I feel like I've made like maybe 50 earrings or more. No, it's got to be more because I ended up going to the Toronto Indigenous Fashion Week, and I remember sitting for like a few weeks straight just making so many earrings to sell. I think I'm pretty sure I made over 50 for the festival. Yeah, and this is another pair that I made. And then these are probably my favorite piece that I've ever made. I made this for an exhibit at the C2 Center for Craft. And these are little newborn moccasins. And I don't know if I have a picture of it, but I actually quilled the bottom, like the soles of the moccasins. And those are meant to be like ceremonial moccasins, so they could have been worn by a baby for like a walking out ceremony. And yeah, these took me like 2 months, but I was working steady on them. And also, gotta give a shout out to my brother. He donated 100-year-old Italian beads for me to make these moccasins. And then that's me with the moccasins in the exhibit. And that's it. Miigwech, guys.
Thank you, Tashina. Dené Sinclair was raised in Selkirk, Manitoba, St. Peter's Ban, and is a member of Peguis First Nation. She is an independent business consultant working closely with individuals, museums, community, and heritage organizations supporting Indigenous languages, knowledge systems, and business management development. Dené is a committed learner of Anishinaabe and spends much of her time sharing, learning, and encouraging language learning in our community. She has been sewing, beading, and crafting for most of her life and credits the many strong matriarchs in her life for instilling a love of making. She is happiest in her craft room with her beads, fabric, and thread.
Miigwech. Hoposho nindoe magnedok ninsa bindegegijigo koyendago namego shendo dem wasakiwe tenon kea ajo naning and onji Selkirk, Manitoba, Jinika dike mi oma Winnipeg ejitayan nungumiko asema gimi nik de dozen deman Ka gima ji dajikamang okomestanogu dasewa ema nui jaganashi imagines miigwech bisantawyeg. So hi everyone, my name is Dené Sinclair, as was introduced very kindly by Cathy Miigwech, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the woodland strap dress. And I know pictures are great, but you know what's even greater is seeing one. And so I did bring my dress, and I invite everyone to come and ask questions and take a closer look. This is a dress that not a lot of people know a lot about, and we're all just learning about it collectively as a community. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what I've learned so far and how this will hopefully be reemerging in our community. So I wanted to give, we're going to get the shortest history lesson on the strap dress from my research and the research of many great women who I'm going to talk about later in the presentation. But just to give us a little situation about the strap dress and where it came from. So the strap dress was found widely across North America. It's not just particular to this area. It was all the way across the prairies. There's examples of it on the West Coast, on the East Coast, in the South. But basically, it's a hide dress made of 2 deer hide. So essentially, one of the hides would make your dress, one of the hides would make some kind of shoulder covering or jacket. And so the research that people have done around this dress is there's essentially 3 kind of eras. And anyone who's a fashion historian or things that you're studying, I'm sure you'll understand how fashion trends have really implicated this dress. So pre-1870, some people will call this the pre-contact era. So dresses were made of hide. They used natural dyes, paint, and quill work. They were worn throughout North America. There's few examples of these in museums, but this is one from a museum in Chicago. So second to that, of course, post-contact, with the influx of European immigrants to the country, fashion changes. And so what was called the fur trade era dress, essentially, depending on the area, but we kind of say 1850 to the late 1800s, these are wool dresses that started to incorporate ribbons, beads, metal. There were regional variations in style, and just like everyone knows in fashion, the way that we dress up here is different than the way that they dress down south. So we got a lot of regional variations. This is well documented through drawings and paintings, especially from this time. But the 2 examples I've put up are 2 of my favorite paintings. And so the one on the top is an example from Barons River here in Manitoba. And then the one from below is from Grand Portage in Minnesota. And I really like the one on the bottom because it looks like a Sears catalog that's like, hey, look at this versatile dress. You can wear it in so many ways. Some of them have the sleeves on their shoulders and some are down. And I just think it's a really fascinating look at what women were wearing at the time. And it's from around 1870, that painting. So on the right, then, you're going to see what was called the reservation era, essentially another trend in fashion that was into the late 1800s and into the early 1900s. So these were velveteen dresses. They incorporated more beads and other adornments. Women started wearing necklaces, other jewelry. And this is where we really saw community-specific identities start to emerge. And so you'll see photographs of these dresses. If you look on Pinterest, if you look on Google, you'll see a lot of these dresses, and they're the velveteen samples. And so that's what my dress is styled on, is the velveteen, recognizing the women of this era. So it was early 1900s. So this is an example from Manitoba, because of course there's examples from all across, but this is a picture that's in the Manitoba Museum of a young girl wearing a strap dress. It was photographed between 1910 and 1913 and from Long Plain, Manitoba. So you can see at the time, the way mothers were dressing their daughters, whether this was for a community celebration. She definitely looks all done up and adorable. So she looks super great. But this is all happening around 1910 and 1913. But there was a lot of things that were happening as well at this time. If we think about our history, if we think about what was happening to our communities around this time, there was a lot of sickness, there was a lot of violence, there was a lot of challenges, but there was also an emergence of the next trend in, especially in this region, in Northwest Ojibwe women's fashion, the jingle dress. So the jingle dress emerged around this point in time, which was 1910 to 1920, depending on the history and the people that you talk to. And so I really love this picture from the 1920s in Red Lake, Minnesota, because you can see all the young women in this picture wearing jingle dresses and how beautiful they look. That style that was really starting to emerge. Jingle dresses were the hot new thing. That's what all the kids wanted. But there's one woman in this picture wearing a strap dress, and it's the grandma in the middle. So you can see how the trends in fashion and what was considered fashionable and interesting, all the young women are wearing what's that next phase of their style of dress. But that grandma looks pretty awesome in her strap dress in the middle, if I do say so myself. So this is a doll that was from the 1950s. And so also what happens in our style is that we do it even now. We have dolls that we dress up in old-fashioned clothing. And to me, that's what this doll had become. This is a doll that's dressed up in old-fashioned clothing in the 1950s. The strap dress was still seen as beautiful. It's not like anyone didn't like it, but it was seen as old-fashioned. And so really the only examples you're going to find kind of 1930 to about 1980 are these sort of historical, old-fashioned style, lots of dolls, lots of sort of remembrance moments of this is how we dressed in the olden days. You know, we don't dress like Little House on the Prairie anymore up here, right? But that's what this would have been seen as at the time. But then around the 2000s, there were some women who decided to remember. They stood up and they remembered what this dress was. And so there's two women, very well known. If you know them, you should look them up. Siobhan Marks is on the left. She's Menominee from Wisconsin. And then my friend Joanne Soldier's on the right, and she's from Swan Lake, Manitoba, and Sioux Valley. She has relations there as well. And they're two, and I call them the ones who remember, because they're the ones who really felt a connection to this dress for their own reasons, and they can talk about that. But really what they tried to do is try to remember what this dress was all about, remember the connections that they felt to their relations. And for Joanne, she'll talk about how it was that picture in the Manitoba Museum from Long Plain that really helped her understand that she had a connection. And for Siobhan, it was seeing representations in museums and through her graduate studies that she started to read papers and learn about the dress. So two women that I feel fortunate to call my friends who really, really have taught me a lot and do a lot for this dress. So for me, the dress was an important part of my journey and my return to ceremony. Sorry, that's a picture of our mom in the middle. We lost her last summer. But I knew she was a really integral part of my own returning to this strap dress, and she was passionate about it. As soon as she saw Siobhan in her dress, she knew that she had a relationship with that dress too. And so she said, I want one of those, Siobhan, help me out. And so Siobhan came up here and taught us how to make them. And so for us, in the Medewan Lodge, we all wore our dresses together, and that's my lodge sister, Marissa, who's Omaha on the right-hand side. And this was in 2019. It was a beautiful moment for many of us. But in 2024, right? I'm disconnected from years. 2024, my friend Joanne and I were on the top left there. You can see us. We decided to host a special at the Manitoba Powwow to welcome back the strap dress. And we knew that it was a part both of the journey that we've had, but also larger in the community. So we said, what's going to happen? We're going to get a couple ladies, make a strap dress, and we get to dance around. It's going to be like 5 of us. It'll be great. Yeah, we had 52 strap dresses show up. You can see videos about this special on YouTube. It was a really beautiful moment. My friend Casey was there as well, but really a super amazing time. And so to me, it's what was old is new again. The strap dress is not new. This has been a part of our communities for a long time. And the exciting part, I think, is seeing how people interpret this in their own relationships and their own identity. So these are pictures, mostly the one on the left is from Manitoba, so some of my friends that danced in the special. And then the pictures on the right are all from Tashina, Wisconsin, which my sister and I traveled to, where it's sort of known as the home of woodland dancing. And so we all showed up, and there was other strap dresses there, and so it was really beautiful. So I'll preface this all by saying I'm not a powwow person. I'm not like a regular dancer at powwows, but to me the strap dress is a part of something bigger and a part of my relationship and community. So, Mick, thanks.
Thank you so much, Dené. I'll now introduce Casey. So Casey Adams, or Flying Overhead in Circles. Eagle Woman is of Nunu, Anishinaabe, and British heritage. She's a registered member of the Fisher River Cree Nation, living on Treaty 1 territory in Winnipeg. Adams is a relational maker, a creator whose work connects to Indigenous knowledge systems of relationality, recognizing her role as an educator, activist, community member, and mentor. She creates work exploring technology and its relationship to her Indigenous identity. Her process is to start with an idea and use a medium that embodies her conceptual intent. She works in adornment, clay, drawing, installation, painting, photography, printmaking, public art, video, AR, and VR.
Thank you. Tansei, kapapama pimanat, mikaswuskoyona tisakason. So you heard the intro, so I don't need to say more about that. But by the way, I was conned into participating in my very first powwow. Never danced before, and I felt like that was I felt like, oh, okay, I can do this, because I didn't know how to powwow dance. No one ever taught me. And so Dené said to me, yeah, I'll show you. It's a very simple design, how to make a strap dress, which, by the way, is this part of my regalia. And she's like, and we don't know how the dance went, so you can dance however you like. So I thought, oh, this is great. I can powwow dance, and no one's going to laugh at me because nobody knows how the dance goes. In the end, we kind of copied a couple of different styles, and I ended up getting my twin sister involved. I dragged her in with me, and I made her a strap dress as well. And we danced for the first time, probably the biggest powwow stage of North America. I'm like, what? But it was a really proud moment because my mom was there, and my mom was never proud of her culture. She was never proud of who she was and where she came from. And so having her there, and she was videotaping us and my sister and I dancing, fumbling along, it was pretty magical. So thank you for that. So I wanted to talk. Some of you might be thinking, well, what is relational making? And I started my career back in, I think technically my first exhibition was through you, Cathy, the Tattoo Nation show. I think it was 97.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Cathy and I met at Concordia University, and she dragged me into a show, reluctantly. And so 97, I started my career at Concordia, and throughout that entire time, I denied who I was. I didn't want anyone to know I was Indigenous. I just wanted to be seen as an artist. I just wanted to fit in. I didn't want anyone to recognize me as Indigenous, because then I would be forced to create work that talked about my indigeneity and my identity. And at that point in time, I really didn't know what that meant. A lot of us who were raised in the public school system, the idea of assimilation. In fact, Cathy talked to me about doing work about my identity, and I think I arrogantly said, I'm already assimilated, it doesn't matter, right? So that's that's my background, basically. But over time, with gentle prodding or pushing by Cathy, some of you students will understand what I'm talking about. I finally was accepting the fact that it doesn't matter how I was raised, that element, that part of me, that blood memory, still existed inside of me. And so over the course of my career, and I've been doing art since 1997, so it's like 26 years, I finally just started embracing and learning. And some of those people that, you know, from the artistic side, Sherry Farrell-Rosette, incredible, one of my teachers, Carmen Robinson, they did, I want to make sure I got the name right, but Clearing a Path, New Ways of Seeing Traditional Art. They were some of they did an exhibition by that title, and it drastically changed the way I looked at combining traditional art with modern work. Greg Schofield, Janine Crouchy, they were huge influences on me. And what I started to recognize is that, you know, going to ceremony, talking with elders, being part of community, I recognized that the objects that we made were often put in different categories. So the works that we created were considered craft. So instead of aligning them with modern contemporary work, the work that was created by the ancestors, or if somebody created work that looked like the work of the ancestors, that was considered craft. So the anthropological understandings were coming into how we define our work. The Western ethos of what craft is was being thrown into an understanding of what our work is about, especially our ancestral work. And also from a contemporary point of view, Indigenous art was only considered taken seriously inside the contemporary world if it had elements of social issues, and if it was presented in a way that looked Western. So taking our culture, our knowledge systems, our understandings, and making it look contemporary were the kinds of works that were palatable within the white box of the art world and within the white box. And so I was struggling with that. I was the terminology art and craft. I was struggling with how our work was being categorized, where I fit in the world. And in many ways, it was kind of like an identity crisis. And so all of those scholars that, and especially Cathy too, made me realize that I could no longer accept the term artist, craft anymore, because it didn't take into account the ways of being and ways of thinking that our ancestors have passed on to us. It didn't encompass all of our understandings of how we see ourselves and how we exist within the world. And so one day I was, I don't dream, or I don't remember my dreams, but I do have waking dreams. And then all of a sudden the word relational maker, well, actually it was relational creator. I brought it to somebody and they said, oh, no, that's making you sound like you're like tied to the creator. And I thought, okay, yes, that doesn't sound right. So I landed on relational making. And so relational making is the skillful production of objects, performance, new media, by an Indigenous person that carries our Indigenous ways of being. So that means our familial knowledge, our cultural, social, land-based understandings, our spiritual understandings are embedded into what we create. And that doesn't change. And I kind of think of, I don't split things into different categories when I'm creating. All of who I am, that blood memory, the ancestors who came before me, all that knowledge goes into everything I make. So I often say that art is basically everything I create is like a self-portrait. Knowledge that I've been carrying, things that I've been learning, always having one foot in the past, one foot in thinking about the future, and being present always goes into my art making process. And I really felt that the term art and craft from a Western point of view didn't address this important ways of thinking and ways of being, if that makes sense. So I just brought a couple slides of works that are embedding that knowledge. So this piece is part of a show that I did in Brandon at the AGSM and Gagi Gajuan, and it's The Way the Water Flows. And this is a beaded piece on a birch bark print that I did that has how we're connected to water. The previous piece, by the way, okay, let me show you. This, by the way, is Manitoba. I think I might be getting the name wrong, but it's what holds us up. And it's inspired by the bandolier bag that holds up that pouch. And it's a 14-foot print. It's printed on vinyl. And it's my hair, my eyes, my nipples, my fingers dipped in period blood that make up the beads. And then there's different body parts, my hands in the piece. And the hide is actually photographs of my skin, especially like the angry scars from having my boy. So that really talks about the sort of my familial and spiritual understandings and cultural knowledge that goes into the work. So this is one of the pieces that are on display at the Manitoba Museum. I love this little boy. He was just so sweet. You can read about it at the gallery in the show, so I'm not going to talk about it. This is a piece that was at the WAG, and it holds the colors that I was gifted. Orange and yellow to represent the sun, blue and white for the sky, and green for the grass. And it's tied to these, I superimposed these circuit boards onto it because even though we embrace and use technology, which is what we have always done, it's kind of like storytelling. Different people will tell different stories, but it's not the details that are important. It's the intent within the story that's important. And so when we're creating works, it's not the medium you need to focus on, it's the intent and the message behind it. And this, you guys are really lucky to see because it hasn't even been opened yet. This is at the McMaster's Museum in Hamilton that's opening up at the end of the month. And this is I'm absolutely excited for this. I haven't seen it in person, but we just installed it. It's a video of me, I was in the water at Lake Winnipeg and I videotaped the water dancing, the light dancing off the water. And so this video has a video playing, a projection from up above of that water, that light dancing on the water. And in the center is a clay vessel that I've been resurrecting the clay knowledge. And it's surrounded by these grandfather rocks, and it has tobacco in the four corners, and it has cedar, and it's held up by these 3 stones, and it's absolutely gorgeous. I can't wait to see it. So, yeah. Anyways, I'll end it there. Thank you.
Thank you to all 3 of you. Can I just ask a couple questions and go from there? So, and I just want to say, when Casey back in the day used to say, "I'm assimilated," I bugged her about it quite a bit. So, but it wasn't, I didn't just bug her, but it's because I didn't believe her when she was saying that. Because she took my moccasin making class that I offered at Concordia University. So I was like, you can't be fully assimilated and have no cultural ties and then come to a moccasin making class. Like there's something there. And then I met her family and just their ways of being and how they do familial love was kind of familiar to me in my own Indigenous family and the way that we communicate and hold each other up. So like there was that. And then she had a show where she was creating artwork about hybridity and mixedness and was using things like horsehair in that. And I think that was the moment I was like, stop saying that to people. Because she was telling everyone in the Winnipeg art scene, I'm assimilated, don't ask me to do anything Indigenous. I'm like, you gotta stop saying that, you're making the rest of us look bad here. But I remember at that point that you know, there seemed to be that exhibition for me, always seemed to be a moment of you kind of just seeing what was already there, I guess. And I saw the video, I watched the video of the strap dance several times, and oh my gosh, like I didn't fully understand what was going on, but it was beautiful, and I was crying watching. And I remember seeing Casey and her twin sister, and I could see you two like whispering to each other, like, what do we do now? And it was the most beautiful thing. And just as Dené talked about variety, different communities creating in different ways, I noticed there seemed to be a lot of variety. It's odd, I never thought about the strap dance as being, like thinking about it in terms of fashion, and thank you for discussing it in that way. I can't imagine what it took like to organize that sponsored dance at the powwow, especially if you don't often partake in powwow. So just as an observer on YouTube, I was so moved. Can I ask what it was like for you, especially how it came into, because it must have just been epic.
It absolutely. So, you know, organizing special at a powwow, like, so we had some protocol, and we had talked with our aunties and our matriarchs, both Joanna and I had talked with them about how we should do this and got some advice, so that was really helpful. And so I just want to acknowledge all those that helped us do that. But we literally were like, when we put the poster out, we're like, okay, probably, I know like 5 people that are gonna come. Okay, cool. So then like a month later, I was like, okay, I think it's gonna be like maybe 10 or 12. And then it got over 20, and I was like, oh, okay, this is gonna be like 20 people there. This is crazy. And so that's kind of what Joanna and I expected. And so when we showed up, and we didn't even really know how many people were gonna be there, because we were at the front of the line, and so we did a grand entry. One of our aunties told us that's what we needed to do so that people could have a moment so they could all see all these dresses. And so that's what most people saw on YouTube, was us just kind of parading in a line where you can see everybody. And I had no idea how many there were until I went all the way around the arena and took the corner, and I looked back, and there was like 60 people behind me. And so if you watch the video, you'll see me go like, oh my God. I had no idea, and then I was a mess, and I cried the rest of the time. And even my sister was there. I asked her to judge the special along with some other people, and they were mad at me for 3 months after because they just said it was overwhelming. It was overwhelming for all of us, but really beautiful. But it was so.
Thank you so much. And while the three of you have been sharing, I was thinking about how Casey talked about relational making and shared about the early days for her. And then I was thinking about Tashina, who was raised on a bison farm and also is a dancer. And I remember, because I do show and tell in my university classes, but let's think for a moment. When you were 5 in kindergarten, you got to bring in a part of yourself and talk about it. How amazing did that feel, right? So I do it as a decolonial strategy in some of my classes, and Tashina was in a class and she brought her regalia, and we were talking about it because it was stunning. It was in the picture, and she was, very quietly talking about it, and then it was like, can I pull it out? And then you pulled it out, and then the whole class went like right to where Tashina was, to the point I had to be like, everyone step back. Are we allowed to come close? And then I remember going close and going, oh my gosh, because it was so beautiful and told an incredible story. And where my question is going, because I was thinking, and then you also shared about growing up a hide tanning. And I think that was a time when I kept being asked by students, because the department I worked in, it was like the longest running Indigenous visual arts program in so-called Canada. The number one question I would be asked is, can you offer courses or workshops on smoke tan, on tanning? And I never could, I never thought of asking my student. But when I think about your regalia and your sharing and what you shared today, I'm wondering I'm just thinking about how is engaging with powwow different maybe from Casey, who maybe did it for different reasons and will continue in different ways. So if you were raised with that sort of engagement with the land that you had, I'm just wondering.
I actually didn't grow up going to many powwows. We would go to traditional powwows. I grew up, my bison ranch was outside of Wewissikapo. So we would go to that powwow and little traditional powwows. So I didn't really grow up doing that. And my regalia was actually created by my parents for my coming out, my womanhood ceremony. So they created everything but my breastplate that I made myself. So I guess that regalia is more ceremonial than for powwow.
Okay. Thank you. So then, can we go back to the difference of lived experiences of being raised? I love the photos of you being a little baby and doing the scraping. So I think that's what's really sticking out to me with the conversation of relational making and how we come to that in different ways. So I think that's kind of where I was going with that in regards to some of Casey's words and this idea of relational making. And quickly, I'm thinking to Casey, because it's interesting that just thinking of your trajectory and how you bring your Indigenous heart home with your making, it's interesting, the dilemma, and I'm just in part saying this for my students here, in the courses I'm taking, the dichotomy between craft and visual art. At one point, what's the final, decision that you're just done with that?
Right, so you have to think about when the word craft was first initiated, right? The idea was that it had to differentiate between the different works that were created in London and in England or in the art scene, the Western art scene, right? So the word craft has changed and evolved, but it eventually became a suppressive. So it was a word because the work that was being created, it's skillful production of something, right? And so it was often made by women. And so the term craft is often relegated to the lowest of the ladder, right? The lowest rung of the ladder. And you've got painting and you've got sculpture high up on the hierarchy of art making. And so there you fine arts. So a lot of people would refer to me as a fine artist. But then my grandmother was a painter, and she was like a hobbyist painter, right? But that didn't mean I was better than my grandmother. My grandmother could pick up anything and make so much out of little, right? And same with my mother. I get that skill from them. But because I have this Western education, and because I learned how to speak art speak, and because I learned how to discuss and defend my work, that work had more value than these beautiful beaded moccasins. And that became problematic for me, right? Certainly you have different skill levels of creation, but what I was trying to resolve in my mind is that just because I went through this Western education does not make me better than the aunties who did quill work, right? Because if you go to the museums and you see some of the quill and leather work that was created long before contact, it's better than anything I've ever made in my life, right?
Me too.
So why is it that work is called an anthropological object? And why are we calling it art? Or why are we even calling it craft? And it just didn't mesh with me, that thinking. So that's why I realized that as Indigenous creators, we need to come up with a way that recognizes our historical information, our storytelling, our ability to communicate who we are and where we come from. And that's why relational making is a term that I hope Indigenous makers use instead of calling themselves artists or craft or hobbyists.
I appreciate it. Thank you. That was perfect. And I think you really described these two relational makers with they create and how they engage in secure ties to the land with making and with gathering and bringing people together in all sorts of ways, not just the actual sewing, but working with others to sponsor the strap. And art historian, we were so excited, Dené. Like we're like, oh my gosh, they're doing it. Like it was a moment. And I appreciate what Casey's saying, because really we're talking about this incredible excellence, but vision, quality. I always think like ancestor artists had art crits too, to get that perfection and to tell the stories in the most phenomenal ways and to experiment with different materials to tell stories. And I think all three of you, but the two invited guests really show just how deep the idea of relational making goes and how it can be presented, which is amazing. And I can't stop looking at that dress. Like I can't. It's in the corner of my eye, and I hope I can go visit.
She's distracting over there.
Oh my.
Can I just say that, like, if you don't know the understanding of relationality, it's the understanding that everything in the universe is in relationship with one another. Mm-hmm. So here, you sitting with us, we're in relationship with one another. The rocks, the land, the water, we're all in relationship with one another. So that means there's a certain amount of care and love and respect and humility that needs to go hand in hand with that. And when I look at Dené's piece, like she put so much relational understanding in the work that she did, and she did that by hand. Like that was hand sewn, right? So there's knowledge embedded into that piece. It's not just an article of clothing. There is so much knowledge embedded into that work.
Mm-hmm. You know, I was always told that it's not art, it's who we are. Mm-hmm. And I never like found a word for it. So I'm going to start using relational making. So thank you.
Yeah, and it certainly is. I get asked a lot. I think anyone who works with beads or has relationships with beads is going to be asked, like how much to make me a pair of earrings, or I'm regularly asked. I make a lot of octopus bags, mostly just because that's just what I love to make, and I make bags. I make large beaded things, and a lot of times I'm asked regularly, how much to make me one? And I was like, well, $4 million. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't have the concept even of tying like monetary value. And it's not that, I'm beyond that. Like, I work in capitalist systems. I understand how that works. But for me, it's just I have a different relationship with those things that I make. And that is not to criticize anyone who has a relationship that does sell pieces. Like, I think that's beautiful as well. It's just not that type of relationship that I have. And so I think, even I'm asked regularly, like, can you make me a strap dress? I feel like you making a strap dress for yourself is the relationship that you should be having with this piece, because for me it's so tied to my relatives, my ancestry, my relationships. And so even when Casey was like, that's really beautiful, because I think I was working on it or showing someone how to make a pattern one day, and then I was like, you could make one too, here you go. And then all of a sudden I'm making her a pattern, and then she had to make one because that's just how it worked. And so the amount of people that I was able to show how to do this for themselves, to me that's such a bigger value, to help people to create those relationships with their pieces. And so that's just how the relationship that I have with this sort of work in the strap dress especially.
Amazing, thank you. Sorry? Yes. We have a few minutes if there's any questions. 2 minutes.
Oh, we have
Over
one
here.
question right there. We do have a microphone, so I can pass the microphone if you have a question.
I feel so fancy. When you mentioned art galleries earlier and giving your work to art galleries or displaying them in an art gallery, it kind of got me thinking of like how colonial they are inherently, and so I'm just wondering like how you feel when you submit your pieces that you've spent hours and hours making and are so inherently tied to your very person, like how it feels to be giving them up to an institution like that. If you could just like elaborate on that a bit more.
Oh yeah. When I was 15, I was just getting into quilt work, and I was in the States. Like, my best friend and her sisters were selling their beautiful work that took them hundreds of hours to these art galleries, and like not even getting that much for them. And it felt weird. But fast forward to like a couple years ago when I submitted those moccasins to the C2 Center for Craft exhibit, I felt so much more connected to them, and I'm at the point where I don't want to sell them. I just want to hold on to them. So, yeah, I hope that answers your question.
And can I also, I know this is like a whole nother discussion, but why it's so important that we have access to our ancestors. So Greg Schofield calls our traditional work ancestors because he sees them as animate things. So it's important to have access to the materials so that we can pick them up, look at them, see how they were made, and then that keeps the continuation of that circle going. The moment that it goes into a museum or an art gallery to be possessed by those institutions and we don't have access to them, that's basically cutting off that circle, right? And it's important for us to continuation that knowledge, and we do that through the making process. Mm-hmm. So. Anyways, I just thought I'd bring that one up too, and it's a hot topic, right?
Absolutely, and so I'll devil's advocate that as well, because I think, I don't show my pieces, and I've never sold to a museum, and I probably would have to think really long and hard about that. But I also recognize that these are the places now that we're learning from, right? So a lot of these pieces, we wouldn't know about strap dresses if it wasn't for museums. We wouldn't know about the hide examples. because they just naturally deteriorate over time. So it's a really interesting and challenging dialogue to have with yourself as an artist or as a maker, because you want your pieces to be teaching and sharing and evolving through the community. And we're using ancestral pieces in institutions to learn from. And so I think about, what if my dress was in a museum and someone learned from it in 300 years from now? Wouldn't that be interesting? I don't know if YouTube's going to be around still, right? So it's a total challenge and no clear answer, absolutely.
Maybe we could take one more question.
There was someone over here somewhere. No?
On the spot.
Cathy probably has another question.
Can I just explain something to my students? So with museum collections, things are changing. And first, I think one of the answers is to have folks like Tashina at museums and within galleries and collections and doing the work and bridging the gaps through relational making. I think those who do so with their hands and creatively, that's not the only thing they do. It's like there's these responsibilities that come with being relational makers. And I love when galleries and museums hire Indigenous people to do that work, and then they become safer spaces. Because I know for Casey and I back in the day, galleries and museums were unsafe for us to go in, which is why she was drawing a line in the sand the way that she did, I think. But not only were they unsafe, but it would be really hard to get in and to visit with ancestral work, or I think Gregory also says the grandmother works. And then depending on the gallery or museum, if you go in, there's rules of how close you can get, if you can touch them or not. Sometimes we're discouraged to go in and see the works. So I think more Indigenous folks working there and having the presence and being caretakers of that work, I think really there's shifts that are happening now, but it really depends on location and what their rules are. Yeah, and one of my proudest moments is I nearly got pulled out by security at a gallery looking at an object. And I think when I stood up for myself I said, this is my inheritance.
Nice.
Nobody cares about this work in this whole building more than I do right now. And I care about its well-being.
Nice.
So, yeah.
I didn't draw the line. I'm just I used materials from the Manitoba Museum to create the We Are Still Here series.
Yes.
So I have good relations with the
No, I meant the Western art world, the assimilation thing, not that.
Yeah.
Jeez. Sorry, Tashina, you were going to say something.
I told myself I wasn't going to talk about my work today because I came as an artist, but pertains to this conversation. I will say that if you are an artist or you're reconnecting with your roots and you want to see the collections, just email me, call me. I'm always accepting new people to come and view the collections, view the ancestors. Because it matters to see them. And if you want to view collections at other museums, let me know, and I'll get you some contacts. If they give you trouble, you let me know.
So thank you so much to the three of you. What you shared was just incredible, and you brought so much love talk into this space. I think we really need to thank the folks at the back there who quickly put everything together so we could do this today. And again, merci beaucoup, Sharon, for your incredible words, and for all of you for coming. And of course, Jennifer Gibson from Gallery 1CO3, organizing this and working with Casey on her incredible show, which everyone should go and check out in Gallery 1CO3 and the building with the escalator, if those of you aren't familiar with it. Thank you.